The tropical slime is a variant of the regular slime, which spawned in Minecraft Earth's jungles, being made of, I assume, a mix of tropical water and slime. They all spawned at the size of a medium slime, and yes, those are tropical fish swimming inside of them. Despite spawning at medium size, they didn't split into smaller slimes. This mob should be in vanilla. They could spawn the same way slimes spawn in swamps, just with tropical slimes and jungles instead. I reckon it should be able to spawn as all the slime sizes. When killed, it should become the next size down. However, instead of splitting into multiple slimes that are the next size down, it should just release some water particles and spawn a tropical fish, which would fly out before flopping on the ground. That way, it's like when you're killing it, you're making it less slimy, which removes more and more water, thus there's less space for the fish. Now, not only is it an interesting and fun variation to the regular slime aesthetically, but functionally too. It's not the most useful change, but it'd be fun. Also, it should probably have a drop that isn't regular slime, like maybe wet slime balls, or blue slime balls, or you can be boring and call them tropical slime balls, but then they're used to craft a blue slime block. Redstoners really wanted coloured slime, so they loved when honey blocks were added and didn't stick to slime blocks. So imagine the innovation created by giving them another slime block, which won't stick to slime or honey because it's wet, or blue or tropical or whatever. So that was one exclusive feature from Minecraft Earth, and how I think it should be implemented into vanilla. There's a bunch more, but first we should learn at least a bit about Minecraft Earth itself. Because if you're like me, you've never played it. And if you're even more like me, you wanted to play it but couldn't because your device didn't support augmented reality. And unfortunately, we can't play the game anymore, because it was discontinued. Luckily for us, however, the Minecraft wiki still has all the wiki pages for the game up. The wiki's description of it reads, Minecraft Earth was a free-to-play augmented reality mobile game, where players could travel to real-life locations to build structures and collect resources. To go a bit further, there were a few main sections to the game. There was the map view, adventures, and build plates. Map view allowed you to walk around in real life to move around on the map. You could find tappables, which you could tap to collect various resources, including mobs. Adventures allowed you to combat mobs and collect more resources. And then there were build plates, which I think were the main appeal of the game. This allowed you to place down a build plate in a real-world environment, and build on it with the resources you'd previously collected. The only exclusive features really were mobs. There were items and blocks, but they were all directly related to specific mobs. Most of the exclusive mobs were variations of vanilla mobs. Some of the most interesting mobs in the base game Minecraft are ones that are completely fictional and not based on real-world animals. If they're making a panda, then it needs to be like a panda, obviously. But if they're making, say, literally any nether mob, they have full creative freedom to create something that is interesting and adds to the game as a whole. So honestly, anything from Earth could be implemented well into the base game, because a bunch of the variations are just fun, unique, and fictional spins on mobs in vanilla Minecraft. I'm just going to focus on a few specific mobs, so let's start with the clock shroom. This is to the chicken what the mushroom is to the cow. It's also one of the many chicken variations found in Minecraft Earth. It functioned the same as regular chickens, except with some slight differences. When in direct sunlight it ran wildly until it was out of the deadly laser. Also, when it was in a dark enough spot, it would spawn mushrooms at its feet, like how a snow golem lays snow across the ground. To implement this to vanilla, they should just spawn on mushroom islands, like how mushrooms already do. The only mob that spawns naturally on mushroom islands are the mushrooms, so adding the cluck shroom there just makes more mushroom mob variety. It's only a plus. Also, they should probably give it a brown variant, like how there's a red and brown mushroom. What if the brown variant could lay cluckshroom eggs, but the red one couldn't? When thrown, they could have the same chance as a regular egg to spawn a cluckshroom, and if that's successful, there's a 50-50 chance that it's either red or brown. Maybe also all egg recipes, like the cake and pumpkin pie, could have suspicious variations for when you use a cluckshroom egg, similar to how feeding a brown mushroom a flower before milking it with a bowl nets you some suspicious stew. Rainbow sheep and wool, and beds, and carpets. This sheep acted exactly the same as a normal sheep, but it had rainbow wool. You could obtain the wool the same way you obtain wool from any other sheep. The wool could be used to make beds and carpet, however the wool was only obtainable through this sheep that you could randomly get. If they were to implement this into vanilla, I reckon they should just not spawn naturally. Instead, allow the player to craft a rainbow dye, using red, orange, yellow, lime, blue, and purple dyes. Then, you could dye a sheep rainbow. Also, I guess this would mean rainbow concrete and whatnot, which is a nice bonus. The Viola Witch. It's in the name. It's a witch, but Viola. They spawned in dark oak forests and acted similarly to normal witches. However, they could use lingering potions of harming and poison when attacking. The witches were also immune to these effects themselves. Furthermore, they usually chugged an invisibility potion before attacking, and, like a normal witch, drank healing when hurt. An interesting way they could add this would be to make them exclusive to witch huts. Normal witches can rarely spawn anywhere in the dark, like zombies and creepers. Also, they're a part of raids, so seeing a witch isn't so rare. The witch hut could be made more unique by having Viola witches spawn exclusively in there. Maybe they could drop something special too? If they had a special drop, it'd make players excited to see a witch hut, more of a pog, and less of a, oh that's neat. I'm not entirely sure what this drop would be, possibly an easier way to make lingering potions, because currently lingering potions aren't used at all in survival, because you need dragon's breath for them. By the way, they should respawn in witch huts every now and then, rather than being a one-time spawn. That way they're renewable. Also, they could just spawn in dark oak forests like in Earth, but I think my idea is more interesting. Bouldering and lava zombies. These are two mobs, but I've put them in one section because they're similar enough. These were just regular zombies, but they looked quite different and had additional abilities. The bouldering zombie could climb walls like a spider and would do so to attack the player, while the lava zombie would try to attack the player like normal, unless at a distance away, in which case they would lob rotten flesh projectiles at the player. I think the best way to implement these would be to have them spawn in the exact way a regular zombie spawns. That way there is more generic hostile mob variety. However, I think make it so when a regular zombie spawns, there's some % chance that it'll be a bouldering or lava zombie, like maybe 15% each. That way there's a 70% chance that a given zombie spawns as a regular, and only a 30% chance for one of the two Earth variants. An argument you might have against making them spawn this way could be that having these zombies spawn anywhere would just be really annoying. This is a fair criticism, but consider spiders and skeletons, both of which already spawn in the same way zombies do. Skeletons shoot projectiles like lobbers, and spiders can climb like boulderings, so I think it'd just make regular hostile mob spawns more interesting without them being wildly annoying. The squid was a mob which would swim around. Now, you may say, that's just a vanilla feature, but the key difference was that they would randomly say, subscribe to Shamorism _ and like the video if you're enjoying it. Just kidding, squids didn't talk in Minecraft Earth. The melon golem. It was essentially a snow golem, except instead of a pumpkin, it had a melon for a head, which couldn't be snipped off. It spat melon seed projectiles, 4 at a time, instead of throwing snowballs. Additionally, they moved by hopping about. Also, they spawned in snowy tundras. I think if these were to be added in vanilla, they shouldn't spawn naturally. Instead, we should be able to carve melons, like pumpkins, then use the carved melons to spawn a melon golem. The golem can function the same as in Earth, except you should be able to snip off the carved melon like you can with the snow golem's pumpkin. When snipped off, they should function like how the snow golem functions normally. Moreover, the regular pumpkin-wearing snow golem should be updated to stay functionally the same, but spit pumpkin seeds instead of throwing snowballs. It should also be called a pumpkin golem. However, when you snip off the pumpkin, it works like how a snow golem currently works. By doing this, we now have a 3-for-1 mob that you can build to spawn. One single mob that can be a snow, pumpkin, or melon golem. Muddy pigs and liquid mud. Before I explain muddy pigs, it's best to explain liquid mud. Liquid mud was just called mud, as at the time mud blocks weren't in Minecraft. Liquid mud, unlike mud blocks in vanilla, was brown. A source block of mud flowed 1 block in each direction. Mud slowed down things trying to move in it. Mud could be collected in a bucket, and like other fluids you could scoop it from the source. However, you could also craft a mud bucket with some dirt and a water bucket. Muddy pigs loved mud. The muddy pig had 2 states, muddy and dried muddy. If they were dried while mud was nearby, they would walk over to the mud and hop in, becoming muddy once more. When out of mud for a prolonged period of time, they would become dried. This would also happen if they entered water. There are a few crossroads in the way the muddy pig could be implemented. In relation to mud specifically, they could make muddy pigs interact with mud blocks, or they could implement liquid mud, making a distinction between the solid mud block and liquid mud. Personally, I think it'd be better to just implement liquid mud. I think liquid mud should work in exactly the same way it did in Earth, but allow pools or ponds of liquid mud to generate in regular swamps. This way both regular and mangrove swamps have a type of mud. Muddy pigs could spawn by these muddy puddles. Another crossroad in the development would be to make muddy pigs a separate mob to regular pigs, or make muddy pigs and regular pigs one and the same. I think making muddy pigs and pigs the same mob is probably the best idea. This means if you wanted a muddy pig, you would just need to craft some liquid mud and find a pig nearby, rather than having to import a muddy pig fresh from a swamp. Also, it means water could make a muddy pig into a regular pig, rather than a dried muddy pig. Because while it makes sense that the mud dries from being in the open air, it doesn't make sense that going in water also dries the mud instead of it being washed off. Now let's quickly go through an honourable mention, the horned sheep. Other than adding a horned sheep for aesthetic variation, I don't think there'd be much point. In Minecraft Earth, if it was attacked, it would try to ram the attacker. It would also drop its horn when killed, but the horn did nothing. Now what mob does this remind me of? The goat! This is basically just a worse goat, so I think unless the intent is to add aesthetic variation to sheep, the horned sheep is unnecessary, since we have a goat which fulfills the ramming and horn purposes of the horned sheep. Right, now for the fancy chicken and fancy feathers. Fancy chickens acted the same as regular chickens, with one key difference. They were petrified of all pigs, fleeing if they got too close. When killed, they would drop a fancy feather. However, the feather didn't have a use. The fancy chicken, if implemented to vanilla, should act the same as it did in Minecraft Earth. For where it should spawn, I think every chicken should have a 5 or 10 or something % chance to spawn as a fancy chicken. They shouldn't be able to spawn from thrown eggs. If bred with a regular chicken, there should be only that 5, 10 or something % chance of the baby being fancy. However, if bred with another fancy chicken, there'd be a 100% chance that the offspring is fancy. Additionally, the fancy feather should be able to replace the regular feather in any recipes the feather is in. For the brush, using a fancy feather instead of a regular one could make it have more durability and brush suspicious blocks faster. Using a fancy feather for a book and quill should net you a book and fancy quill. This could let you change the text formatting like color, bold, italics, etc. Which, briefly, why don't we have a way to do that? I mean, don't get me wrong, you can do it. It's just that it requires you to write a complicated command to spawn one in, with text formatting already made. So why haven't they just implemented a way to do this in survival without cheats? For an arrow, the fancy feather could, it could give your arrow some fancy particles as it soars through the air. Then also some fancy particles when it hits something. Maybe some fancy sounds as well? Maybe it could do something functionally different too, though I'm not sure what that function would be. Also, this isn't a feather recipe, so bear with me. What if you could place it, like so, in the bed recipe to create a fancy bed, which is just a bed with a fancy pillow? Maybe this fancy pillow is just so fancy and so soft that it allows you to sleep when there are monsters nearby, or even during the day to skip to the night. Also, I think any color of bed should have a fancy pillow variant. While this does double the amount of bed items, they did it with boats when they added chest boats, so... And that's it! While I did cover quite a few of Earth's exclusives, there are still quite a lot of ones left that I didn't cover. I'd be up for a part 2 at some point, so if that's something you'd like to see, let me know in the comments.